So look, I made a movie called The Last Amityville Movie, and in the movie I'm basically playing myself. And there's a point in the film where I am making a video and I'm talking about a video that I've made called The Wackiest Werewolf Movies That I Could Find. And it was a joke, but I actually thought, yeah, I should probably make that video. So that's what this video is. I'm actually showing you some of the wackiest and weirdest werewolf movies that are out there. And there's 7 of them. Let's check this one out and see how hairy this list can get. So, I have a new sponsor with Tantally, a maker of life-size doll torsos. And I realize that sometimes, in troubled times like these, we all need a good outlet. And I figure that you probably don't want to hear me talking about things like this. So I brought in Christy. Take it away, Chris.
Hey guys, Tantally only uses food-grade TPE material and is very soft in all the places you would like it to be soft. It's also extremely realistic. They offer free shipping to over 30 countries, and when they ship, they do it discreetly, so you don't need to worry about anyone who knows your preferences. And right now, they're letting us give you a special offer. Go to Tantally.com, a site so steamy we can't even show it here without getting in YouTube jail, and use the code TIMELINES in the comment area when you buy, and you'll get a 12% discount on your entire purchase. Back to you, Josh. Josh?
Oh, sorry.
What were you doing?
Oh, I shouldn't be ashamed. I was on Tantally.com. Number 7. Let's kick this off with a little ditty from 2005 called Mexican Werewolf in Texas, which begins with a bunch of young folk hanging out in a little restaurant, and there's a jerky guy named Tommy that causes trouble. The small town is called Furlough, and our main character is a young girl named Anna who's dating a boy named Miguel, but her parents are angry because they're racists and don't want her seeing a Mexican boy. There's trouble in the town because there's something out there at night killing their goats, and everyone thinks that it's a chupacabra, and they start to rally up and go out a-hunting. When the thing graduates to eating people, things ramp up, and Miguel calls in an oddball cryptid expert to come in and track it down. They draw up a sketch of what they think it is, and it looks like a werewolf, but they keep calling it a chupacabra. It starts wiping people out left and right, and again, they describe it as a werewolf, saying it's covered in fur with long teeth, but when we finally get a look at it, it's not much like that. And that's why I have this one at the bottom of the list, because it may be wacky, and it may have werewolf in the title, but there's no actual werewolf in this movie, which is hilarious because of how this is marketed. It was both written and directed by Scott McGinnis, and he actually has a fairly substantial filmography in various departments of major films and TV shows as a property master, which is also referred to as a prop master. And their job is to take care of all the physical objects used on set, like furniture, weapons, and even things like handbags. But this was one of 3 projects that he directed, being the second. But the final feature, as the only thing he did after this was a short film. It's clearly made on a low budget, but feels like a sci-fi original, even though it was not, and it was a direct-to-video film. But with the commentary on the racial issues on the border town and the subplot of the man using the concept of the Mexico-based creature to stir up this already brewing tensions, it's doing more interesting stuff than normal. And considering that this movie was from 20 years ago, it's another example of movies from the past with prominent racial themes, but it's not great. It's a little on the dull side, and there's just not enough monster action to keep it going. Number 6. Get ready for some goofiness, because now we're going to 2011's Weed Wolf. Yes, Weed Wolf. The title of this video is Wacky Werewolves, after all. It has a couple of stoners camping in a tent, and then a random werewolf attacks them and kills them. And when I say werewolf, I mean literal man in a wolf mask and flannel shirt. There's then a sheriff with a thick southern accent who starts off making fun of his Hispanic deputy, so I guess that's going to be a theme here. And there's also a fourth wall break, as the film's director tells us about footage that was banned in several countries and has been added back into the film, and proceeds to show it to us. That lost footage just consists of a guy pretending to be a native and gives a couple of women with him some peyote and some weed, which then gets the attention of the weed wolf and he kills them. And I'm not sure why this scene gets the whole band footage set up. It's pretty basic stuff. Then, I have no idea what's going on, but the weed wolf and another werewolf have a lightsaber battle, and there's weird babies and pigs here, and I think it's supposed to be the wolf tripping on peyote, but honestly, your guess is as good as mine. There's even a take on the whole shining bear thing, but this one goes on for such a long time. The police try to cover up things, but it's a little hard when the wolf is apparently also going into convenience stores on camera. Someone that I think is meant to be Willie Nelson comes in and sings the legend of the weed wolf, and he was a weed farmer in the 1800s whose crops were destroyed, and he ran off into the woods and starts preying on those that smoke, and it seems as if he's returned. And yeah, Weed Wolf is directed by Ron Bramhall, and he also co-wrote it and plays a couple of characters in it, and it would be the only film that he'd make. He would, however, act in a couple of other low-budget films. The budget is listed as $25,000 on IMDb, and it's definitely ultra-low budget, which you can tell by the wolf costume, and it's clearly leading into the goofier aspects of things. And some of the comedy lands?
God damn, boy, put your sheet back on. You white as porcelain. God damn.
But a much larger portion of it does not. However, the biggest thing that it has going against it is it's just under 2 hours long. Like, honestly, this premise likely would have felt too drawn out at around an hour and a half. And an hour and 10 minutes thing probably would have been best, but 2 hours just feels like way too much. Number 5. This next one is from 2012, and it's called Strippers versus Werewolves. And why not? They've already fought zombies, so werewolves seem like the next logical step. We begin in London at a gentleman's club as a dancer witnesses a client turning all wolfy and then stabs him. And her boss is Ursa. We also meet a group of werewolves that all set up like the mob, and it seems like they're there to rescue a guy, but instead they're just there to eat. Turns out that Jeanette knows more about the wolves than it seems, and that pen was silver, so she's prepared to face their revenge. Meanwhile, Alan Ford makes an appearance, and you may know this guy from Snatch, or as a horror fan, maybe Cockneys vs. Zombies, but for extra werewolf cred, he was also in An American Werewolf in London in a tiny role as a taxi driver. They do what they can in order to try to cover up the killing so that the gang doesn't retaliate, and there's an added wrinkle when that girl in the beginning is engaged to one of the werewolves. He doesn't know that she's a dancer, and she doesn't know that he's all fuzzy, but it seems like he may have also given her the curse. More trouble abounds when the boys are able to track down the source of their pack members' demise to the club, and it's a battle between the fur-clad and the unclad. This one's coming at you from Jonathan Glendening, and he's been in the industry in smaller roles since the mid-90s and directed a handful of films, but this would end up being his final one. This is his second werewolf feature, actually, since the movie he made before this one was called Night Wolf. This one throws in a small part for Robert Englund himself, who knows a thing or two about strippers fighting supernatural beings since he was in Zombie Strippers, but they also sneak in little appearances from Lynette Anthony, Steven Berkoff, and Mark Bayless. Overall, it's not great. It's fairly entertaining, and there's some stuff in there that I like quite a bit, but it also falls flat a good amount of the time. Number 4. Let's go back in time now, all the way back to 1971 for this next one, and it's Werewolves on Wheels. We begin with a motorcycle gang, and what constitutes that? Are you just a motorcycle gang if you and a bunch of your friends go riding together? Or do you have to have like membership and bylaws and such? They get into a scuffle with some guys in a pickup truck that try to run them off the road and cause a bunch of ruckus anywhere that they go. And why is it that there's big obvious calendars in movies that I'm not doing the timeline for? Like, this would be very helpful. They end up getting lost on their travels and end up in the remains of an old church where they're greeted by a bunch of guys in hooded robes who give them food and drink. It's drugged though, and they pass out, and the hoodies conduct some sort of ritual over them. They wake up in the middle of it and escape, killing the priests, but each of them are marked. Later though, as they make a stopover for the night, a furry beast attacks them and kills a couple of them, but only Taro is able to see just how heavy that things are and that someone is controlling the vibes. But then, when more killings occur, it's up to the guys to figure out if those robed guys are still after them, or if one of their own is hiding a hairy secret, which sounds, yeah, not the way to word that. This one was co-written and directed by Michael Levesque and was his directorial debut, although he basically only did one feature after this and some assorted other projects, but also did a ton of work as an art director on a bunch of movies and even a handful of episodes of Silk Stockings. In this time frame, biker movies were starting to gain popularity, which was its own whole subgenre, so it seemed like a good idea to cross it over into some horror stuff as well. Hence, Werewolves. Keep in mind this was only 2 years after Easy Rider, so people were keen to see dudes on bikes, and this one used a bunch of actual biker guys for the hanging around scenes. Since they weren't actors, they just let them do their own thing, and they filmed it. Speaking of Easy Rider, Dennis Hopper and Peter Fonda did run with some biker groups back then, and some of those guys were in this movie, and several of the people that worked on this worked on later Hopper biker flicks, and there was a rumor going around that hinted that Dennis Hopper actually directed this one as well, but that's not true. And this one's pretty fun. I wish there was more werewolf going on and less wheels, but it does what it says that it wants to do. Number 3. Here's a weird one, and it's from a similar time frame since it's 1973's The Werewolf of Washington. A voiceover tells us that he's the White House press secretary and he's been having an affair with the president's daughter, but wants to end it so he gets himself reassigned to Budapest. He's also a Cylon, and while he's over there he gets attacked by a wolf that he manages to club to death, but not before being bitten. He goes back home and back to work for the Prez, and on the first night that there's a full moon, a woman is killed by a growling beast. He notices a pesky pentagram on his palm, and another White House staffer is then slain by a fuzzball wearing a suit. And this guy's here, and he's the weird cop from those couple of James Bond movies that they had to shoehorn in a Southern American police officer for some reason. Jack starts to figure out that he's become a werewolf, mainly because the Hungarian woman straight up told him that he would be, and he tries to tell his superior about it, although he won't believe him. It's a classic transformation scene with the whole sort of time lapse fading into each aspect, and he continues his attacks until they try to figure out exactly what he is and how to stop him. And this is sort of a comedy. There's bits that are clearly meant to be funny, but it's not going for goofy laughs or anything, and there's not much in the way of jokes, really, so it's confusing. And this was both written and directed by Milton Moses Ginsburg, and was basically his last film. There was a gap from '73 all the way until 1999, when he came back and only did a couple of shorts. Before this, he did an oddball film called Coming Apart that was a low-budget experimental number that developed a nice cult following. It seems that shortly after this film was released, Ginsburg was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, became depressed, and decided to simply work in editing. This one was intended as a sort of political satire on the Nixon administration and was released right in the middle of the Watergate scandal, although it's not really making a ton of commentary. It wasn't too successful on release, mainly for those political aspects, so they re-released it as Werewolf at Midnight and changed the marketing to make it look more like a standard lycanthrope film, although it still didn't hit much like that they were hoping. Later on, in 2012, a film called President Wolfman was released, which took a huge chunk of this film, along with clips from others, and then re-edited them and overdubbed them with new dialogue to make a more comedic version of this story. Number 2. This next one's a touch on the goofier side, since we're going to go to 1989 now and look at My Mom's a Werewolf. It's set in suburbia, and we have Mom Leslie and her daughter meets up with fortune teller Ruth Buzzy. And her crystal ball is one of these awesome things that were everywhere in the 80s and then just straight up vanished. Dad is this guy that you've seen in 100 TV shows, but he was also a replacement Herman Munster at one point.
I bet that you didn't know that Lon Chaney Jr. was the only actor to play all the monsters: Frankenstein, Dracula, the Wolfman, and the Mummy.
Well, technically he didn't play Dracula. He played son of Dracula, but that's splitting hairs. Mom goes to the pet shop where she encounters Nancy's dad, who helps her out when she's hit by a purse snatcher. They have lunch together and he starts to lick her hand, which Jennifer sees, and then he kisses her. And if you're a Friday the 13th fan, you'll recognize Diana Barrows from Part 7 here, playing a similar nerdy girl role as the best friend. Later, he hypnotizes her, but instead of having sex, he bites her directly on the toes. Afterwards, she starts to have weird visions, but then one morning wakes up with large fangs. Her attempts to get them filed down don't work, but then she suddenly has a craving for raw meat, pointy ears, and of course, fur starts to sprout all over her body. She also starts flirting with her daughter's guy friends, like high school kids. It doesn't take too long for Jennifer to figure out that her mom's a werewolf, and she has to try to help fix her wolfy condition. And this is clearly more of a broad comedy. Like, this was an era of this kind of monster-influenced silliness, and it looks like title-wise it was taking this inspiration from My Best Friend is a Vampire. The director is Michael Fiscia, and his only previous film was the classic Death Spa. The writer, however, was Mark Pirro, who I've encountered a few times recently on the channel. He did A Polish Vampire in Burbank and also Death Row Game Show, and he wrote and directed those ones, but here he's only the screenwriter. There's also a small role in there for Carol Kester, and in the space of 1 year she was in this, Teen Witch, and Ghoulies Go to College, so it was a silly horror comedy time for her. Oh, and by the way, Tina Caspary, who is Jennifer here, was also in Teen Witch. And after this, it seems like she was basically like, yeah, this isn't for me, and didn't appear in any more movies. Eventually, there is a full wolf out and a battle, and it's about as silly as you're expecting. And this is fairly dumb and lightweight, and it's not good, but I'll be damned if it doesn't give me a nostalgia smile. Also, at the very last minute, look for a random cameo from Lucy Brennan. Number 1. Let's wrap this up with probably the wildest one that I could find, and it's from 2014, and yep, it's Bubba the Redneck Werewolf. It opens up with his own theme song, which is spectacular.
But now he's Bubba, yes Bubba, Bubba the Redneck Werewolf.
And then there's this guy working at the dog pound, and his life isn't great. He's always messing up at work and loses his girlfriend, and his friends are pretty dopey.
Long John Silver's ain't bad neither.
I'd like to go on record as saying that Long John Silver's is probably some of the grossest, weirdest fast food out there, and yeah, I would go there right now, so like, help me. After saying that he'd do anything to get his girl back, the devil strolls into the bar and convinces Bubba to sell him his soul in order to be stronger and better. However, the next morning, when he wakes up, he discovers that he's been permanently transformed into a werewolf. The people of the town have varying reactions to his metamorphosis, from complete indifference to shocked awe. But some robbers come into a bar, and he finds out that he has a certain hunger for human meat. Meanwhile, the devil is going around the town, causing chaos amongst the civilians, and tricking people into selling their souls, but then perverting their wishes like some sort of wishmaster or something. But then when they discover a loophole with Bubba's contract, it's up to him to stop the devil and save the town. And this sheer weirdness is from Brendan Jackson Rogers, and it was his second feature film. And he's done a whole bunch of short films of a parody nature. And it looks like this was the last full film that he did with everything after this being shorts again, mixing different pop culture characters like Angry Birds box, Game of Minions, and Ranger Things, which is Stranger Things and the Power Rangers. It seems like this was done on a micro budget, but there's a handful of cool effects that seem to have cost a little bit of money, and the Bubba and the Devil makeups were well done enough. And also, the movie was written by Mitch Hyman, who plays the devil in the film, and before this was a movie, he wrote it as a comic book, and a version was printed in a book called Bound in Darkness from Cry for Dawn Comics. And this probably isn't for everyone because it's pretty silly and backyard, but I had fun with it. Not all of the jokes land, but a good amount of them do. And everyone seems to be having a good time here. And I'll say that even though Bubba being a werewolf isn't really that focal a point of the plot, like that stuff matters very little overall, it's worth checking out.
That's how I spelled the letter T when I was a cheerleader.
Found my wallet.
So there you have it, 7 movies with wacky werewolves. And I expect every other comment to be about the word wolf. So go ahead, let me know. Let me know if you've seen any of these, which ones you like, other wacky and strange werewolf movies that are out there. Tell me those in the comments. I want to see it because there will be a follow-up list to this in the future, I imagine. Tell me all that. If you like this video, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button if you like the channel, and go to my Patreon page at patreon.com/movietimelinesandhelp. help support this channel and keep it going. And yeah, just keep me watching these movies. I appreciate that. I appreciate you for watching, and I'll see you very shortly for another great video. Bye-bye.